Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of Adventure. Today we will be continuing Thaddeus' story in Birth of the Ice Kingdom. To catch you up, Thaddeus and his party were tasked by the king to spy on the Dark King's land. After a long journey, they arrived and crossed the border, but with the uncomfortable atmosphere this land embodied, Thaddeus began to tell a tale to ease the tension. Long ago, before ice covered everything in the north, a mighty kingdom flourished. This kingdom was Letus, and its borders spread to the edges of the continent, including south to our border. The immense size of the kingdom made merchants travel several months just to cross it. For many generations, the kingdom was on the forefront of innovation, trade, and citizen well-being, until King Geir took the throne. King Geir's greed was compared to a dragon's, hoarding gold like it was his lifeline. His palace storehouses were filled to the brim with piles of gold and treasures. Every year, King Geir commissioned new storehouses just to store the new gold he obtained. Most of his gold was collected from the citizens in taxes. King Geir taxed every penny they had, leaving most to starve in the streets. Seeing people line the streets and the alleys, unable to afford a roof over their heads, didn't bother the king at all. As long as he had his piles of gold, it didn't matter who was left homeless. He even openly ridiculed them, treating them like they didn't deserve to be part of his kingdom, since they didn't pay their share of the exorbitant taxes. Then, on a hot summer day, in the cave on the ice-covered Store Mountains, to the north of the kingdom, a man was born from the ice. He emerged, stumbled, and fell. His body was made from the very ice he emerged from. With his weak, shaking legs, he slowly explored his surroundings, venturing out of his cave and around the mountains, seeing the vast expanse of the world below. His eyes took in the rolling green hills in the distance and the huge forests that covered much of the landscape. He fell in love with these sights. Then, right at the horizon, he saw something interesting. It looked like a small rock mountain that had been hollowed out. Compared to the rest of the landscape, this hollowed out mountain felt out of place. Curious, the Iceman decided to go see what it actually was. As he traveled, every creature and person he encountered ran from him in terror. At the mere sight of him, they fled, screaming. He looked at his reflection in the pond and saw how different he looked from the people he was encountering. His semi-transparent body was cold and rough to the touch. Comparing that to the smooth, olive bodies the others had, he saw why they would run. Through some unknown magic, he was able to change his appearance to resemble the humans he saw. His skin was still cold to the touch, but now he could pass for a human. He also found that this allowed him to speak and understand the language of the humans. So off he continued, to the mysterious hollow mountain. As he approached, he saw a wall of stone, with people standing on it. A large hole sat in the wall with people passing through. On either side, large wooden doors sat ajar, ready to seal up the opening when needed. The Iceman walked through the large opening and into the hollowed-out mountain. He stopped in the middle of the street, amazed at this place. The great stone wall spread as far as he could see in either direction. Inside the hollowed-out area, large wooden buildings stood stretching towards the stone wall. Everywhere the Iceman looked, humans walked, talked, traded, and mingled. Who knew there was this many humans living here? He thought to himself. Horse-drawn carts ran around him, with the drivers hurling insults as colorful as autumn leaves. But by their tone, he could see that they were mad at him. Getting over his amazement, he continued into the city, exploring the ever-expanding streets and alleys. But as he walked around, the Iceman noticed that many people were lying on the streets. Some of these people had mats on the ground and held out their hands or a small cup, asking each passerby for something. They were dressed in old torn rags that didn't always fit well. Their bodies looked thin, frail, and weak, and some had accepted their impending death and just laid there by the side of the road. The sun, high in the sky, radiated heat. In the harsh sunlight, the Iceman could feel his skin steaming. Looking at these hurting and desperate people lying on the road, he reached out his hand and created a few small blocks of ice. The first few who saw jumped back in terror, but as the Iceman kindly smiled and slowly handed it to them, they hesitantly accepted. The air around these blocks cooled rapidly, helping these people survive the harsh sun. Before long, the other people in the alley saw these ice blocks and came to receive one of their own. Within an hour, there were hundreds of hot and desperate citizens lining up for their own frozen blocks. They accepted them with glee, feeling saved from the harsh summer sun. Suddenly, living on the street was a little more bearable. The mad rush of homeless people to the particular alley alerted the guards, and when they investigated, they found an unknown man creating crystal-like blocks out of nothing. The guards snatched a block from one of the homeless people. As soon as they felt its cold, smooth texture, they dropped it and watched it shatter on the ground. Staring at the shards, they realized it was ice. But unlike normal ice, the shards weren't melting. Shocked, they quickly grabbed another one and ran straight to the king. "What is this you've brought me?" the king asked, annoyed that the lowly town guard disrupted his day. "It appears to be a block of ice. You better not be wasting my time." "This is no ordinary ice, your majesty," the guard said nervously. "We saw a man making these blocks out of nothing and handing them out to people in an alley. We also watched one of the blocks shatter on the ground, but the shards didn't melt." "Didn't melt?" the king asked, now closely examining the block he was holding. "And you said this person was making them out of nothing?" "Yes. Even in this hot summer sun, the shards were not melting. I don't understand how, but this man formed these blocks with his hands, but was holding nothing before the cube appeared." The king rose and walked to one of his giant windows overlooking the town. "What will happen to my kingdom and my wealth if he continues giving out these ice crystals? When my citizens rise up against me, this man trying to lead a revolt against me, maybe I could convince him to only make these things for me. Then I could sell them for a high price, and the citizens will be unable to follow the man in a revolt." The king, now with a huge devious smile, suddenly turned to the guards. "Bring this man to me. I have need of his powers." Immediately, the guards stood and left the throne room. Within an hour, they were back with the Iceman in tow. The guards dragged the man in, as he had no interest in seeing the king. Bringing him near the throne, the guards threw him to the ground, forcing him to kneel with his head down until the king spoke. "Welcome to my kingdom," the king said, as if welcoming a close friend. The king held up the block of ice the guards had given him and pretended to be inspecting it. "I hear you have quite the ability. Being able to make ice that doesn't melt, that's quite incredible." The king rose from his throne and approached the Iceman. The Iceman remained still as the king approached. He knelt there, completely void of emotion. He did not care about the king, nor did he completely understand what being a king meant in this human world. All he wanted to do was leave the castle and go back to the people who excitedly accepted what he gave. The king, displeased with this man's lack of reaction, continued. "Let me get straight to the point. What is it you wish to do here? What is your plan with giving peasants this special ice?" The king paused, waiting for a response. After a few minutes of silence, he continued. "You know your powers are wasted on the peasants out there. They're just the scum that keeps me wealthy and on the throne. They keep this kingdom going, but they don't deserve what you're giving them. All they do is take, take, take. Then, when you have nothing else to give, they abandon you." The king paused. "No, they don't deserve your powers, but I do," he whispered, talking more to himself. Addressing the Iceman again, he continued, "If you work for me, we can sell your unmelting ice to the other kingdoms for a mountain of gold. With me at the helm, we will charge as much as we want, and I'll become the richest king in the world." The Iceman still knelt, unresponsive and unmoving. This angered the king. He was giving the Iceman a chance at a lavish, worry-free life. With the mountains of gold they could make, they could have anything their hearts desired. And with having a monopoly on this limited resource, other kings would pay any astronomical number they asked. How could this man not see that? Slowly the Iceman raised his head and looked at the king. In a deep voice he said, "My powers are to be given freely to those in need. I do not desire riches. I do not desire to limit who receives the ice I create." Slowly the Iceman stood tall, reaching eye level with the king. "This disrespectful creature! How dare he refuse my orders? He needs to be shown who is actually in charge." Infuriated, the king screamed, "Guards! Imprison this man for treason!" Within seconds, the Iceman was surrounded by guards, with spears at the ready. Without resistance, the Iceman was taken down to the dungeon and locked in a cell. Excited he caught his money-making creature, the king would now help this man learn the hierarchy of this kingdom. "You will rot down here until you choose to work for me. I'll put you through the worst torture imaginable, so that you understand that my word is final." With a confident turn, the king walked out of the dungeon, thinking, "In a few days, he'll be begging to work for me." Weeks passed, and the Iceman was no closer to giving in to the king's demands. The king paced around his throne room daily, annoyed that this man hadn't changed his mind yet. The king thought up new torture techniques to help force this man to work for him. But no matter what torture or punishment the king gave, the Iceman never bent. He remained set in his ways and refused to give in. Even as the daily torture continued, the Iceman showed no sign of changing his mind. After months, his beaten body lost its human-like color. The olivey color he donned when he walked into the town was replaced with his light blue, semi-transparent natural skin. The whippings and beatings left deep scars that didn't appear to be healing. They left gashes in his cold body. But no matter how beaten he looked, the Iceman didn't give any signs of fatigue. His face didn't show any hint of pain, which greatly angered the king. In a fit of rage, the king told his guards to round up everyone the Iceman had helped and bring them in shackles to the dungeon. The guards scoured the city, finding everyone even believed to have been near the Iceman when he came to town. The guards met the king in the dungeons with 40 people in tow, their arms and legs shackled. The king spoke to the Iceman. "I tried to be reasonable when we first met. Then I tried to convince you through a little harsher means. But now you leave me no choice." He motioned for the guard to bring the first person. "Remember him? According to my guards, he was the first person to receive your help when you arrived. Apparently, he was clutching the ice block you gave him when he was taken from the street." A guard aggressively forced the man to his knees and pointed the tip of his spear to the man's back. In one swift motion, the guard shoved his spear forward, piercing the man through. The Iceman gasped as a bit of the man's blood flew into his cell. As the guard pulled back his spear, blood pooled around the man now slumped on the floor. The Iceman sat there thinking, How could you do this to your fellow man? For a long minute, the dungeon was silent, until a young child from the group of prisoners screamed. For a few seconds, chaos reigned in the dungeons. The captive people screamed and tried to run away, but with the guards at the door and the shackles around their hands and feet, they could barely move. Annoyed by this commotion, the king turned and shouted, "Silence! The next person to scream will be put to death." Horrified, the people quieted down. With a large sigh, the king addressed the Iceman again. "This man was only the beginning. I will keep sending these people to the afterlife until you finally choose to work for me." "Why?" the Iceman choked out. "Why are you doing this to your own people?" "My own people? Don't make me laugh. These people are nothing more than scum that pollutes my great kingdom. They steal resources from those who actually deserve them, and still they muddy the streets with their filth. They are an embarrassment to this kingdom, and a stain that should be removed." A few of the homeless people gasped as they heard what their king truly thought of them. The king leaned in closer to the cell and whispered, "And no one's going to miss them when they're gone." Hearing this, something snapped in the Iceman. Anger flowed through his icy body, causing his skin to turn a light shade of red. The temperature in the dungeon dropped quickly, and soon everyone could see their breaths. Ice began to spread out from the Iceman, slowly covering the cell, until the whole cell was covered in a layer of ice. The king stepped back in fear, watching ice form out of nowhere. "Gods!" he yelled. But before the guards could do anything, a blast of icy air shot out, spreading ice outside the cell. The guards soon found their feet frozen to the floor. Unable to move, the ice inched its way up their legs, and before long covered their whole body. The Iceman stood up, easily breaking free from the frozen chains. He slowly walked towards the king, snapping the cell bars as if they were sticks. The king tried to back away, but tripped on the uneven floor. Horrified, the king started crawling down the corridor, grasping at the floor to make him move faster. But it was too late. The king couldn't escape. Fueled by rage, the Iceman let his powers flow out of him without restraint. The temperature dropped drastically, freezing the whole dungeon. Ice spread to every corner and crevice, coating the whole area in a thick layer of ice. With nothing to cling to, the king watched as the Iceman gently placed his hand on the king's chest. Within seconds, the king was frozen solid. The Iceman stood tall, looking down at the frozen king, having to know that this tyrannical king could no longer hurt those in his kingdom. But looking at the frozen king, the Iceman still felt broken inside. Whatever snapped earlier did not fix itself after the king was frozen. He could still feel some of the anger from before, even though the one his anger was directed at was no more. He didn't know what to do with this feeling, but now was not the time to worry about that. He had just freed the homeless captives from their captor, and now he needed to break them out of their chains. Walking back to the captives, the Iceman froze as he saw them frozen in place. They had tried to flee, but the shackles kept them from going far. Their bodies were frozen in place, with terrified looks on their faces. The Iceman fell to his knees and screamed in frustration. The very ones he wanted to help were now frozen forever. Tears fell as he let his head rest on the ground. All he wanted to do was to free these people from a king who didn't care about them. They weren't supposed to get caught up in this. "If only I had controlled my power. If only I didn't give in to my rage," he thought. "Now I'm no better than the king." After a long time in the dungeon, feeling great remorse for what he did, the Iceman made his way out and found the whole castle was frozen. Every pathway, plant, servant, guard, and room was covered in a layer of ice. He rushed to the castle wall and found his ice was still spreading over the city. Little by little, a layer of ice spread over the whole city, freezing many people in their tracks. The Iceman tried to focus and stop the spread, but whatever snapped inside of him, down in the dungeon, made it impossible to stop this. He watched as, over the next few hours, the whole city was engulfed in a layer of ice. Buildings glistened as light from the sun reflected off them. As he walked through the streets, he saw countless people frozen in place. These statues would now serve as a reminder of the atrocity he caused. The ice continued to spread to the mountains far on the horizon. The Iceman had no idea if it would ever stop spreading, but regardless, he knew he was responsible for killing this kingdom. Filled with regret, the Iceman stayed in the city, making the frozen castle his home. He wanted to continuously remind himself of all the innocent lives he had taken, so he stayed and watched over their frozen corpses, remembering what happens when he lets his power flow free. One day, years after the fall of the once great kingdom, a wandering traveler came passing through. The Iceman was shocked to see another human, figuring most had knew the fall of the kingdom and had chosen to stay away. Cautiously, the Iceman approached this unexpected traveler. "Hello," he said in a small, soft voice. "What brings you to this frozen ghost town?" "Oh," the man said, "I didn't know anyone lived here. Are you the only one here?" "Yes, I live alone in this town," the Iceman said, trying to make it sound better than it looked. "What brings you here?" "I had heard stories of how this great kingdom had fallen suddenly, and wanted to find out if it was true." The man paused as he inspected a frozen person. "Exquisite detail, and the color looks so realistic. Do you know who created these statues?" "Pardon?" "These statues are so lifelike. It looks like an actual person frozen in ice. Do you know how they were created?" The Iceman lowered his head, feeling great shame. "They aren't statues. Those are real people who are frozen in ice." It took a few minutes for the man's brain to fully process the words. "Wait! You're telling me all these people are actually frozen in ice?" "Yes, they are all frozen." The Iceman felt incredibly guilty, as it was his fault this happened, which is also why he stayed, so that he would never forget what he did. "Is there any worry of me freezing over like them? Do I need to leave before the ice gets me?" the man said, now extremely nervous. "No, there's no worry of that," the Iceman said, trying to sound reassuring. "Come to the castle. It will get dark and very cold soon. Join me and I can tell you the full story." The Iceman led the way to the castle and showed the man to one of its many rooms. There they sat as the Iceman retold the story of how he froze the whole kingdom. By the end, the man looked like he felt sorry for the Iceman. It was like he understood the grief and felt sympathy for the man who caused so much death. "You know, hearing your tale reminds me of a story I heard growing up. May I share it with you?" the man asked, watching the Iceman nod in agreement. "Once upon a time, a young man found himself in the undying lands." Thanks for listening to The Voice of Adventure. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also keep up with the stories and see extra content on Instagram at Josiah the Author. Be sure to tune in next month to hear the story of the Undying Lands. See you in the next story.